I'm Valerie Streeter, and I have worked with the Tulalip Tribes for the last 11 years. And you notice I said an S at the end of that, Tulalip Tribes, because there is no really Tulalip tribe. It's Snoqualmie, Snohomish, Skykomish, and a bunch of other allied tribes that were told, now you're going to live on this piece of land. And so they didn't know what to do when they were going into the government, what to call themselves. Is there a highlighter on this? Oh, there we go. So Tulalip Bay is the heart of the reservation, which is about 22,000 square acres. Tulalip's in the middle of Puget Sound, and we've got quite a bit of shoreline. So they ended up calling it Tulalip Tribes. So you'll notice an S, which is unique. It's because it's more than one tribe. And so I'm going to talk about Salmon Recovery, which is, as an employee of a tribe, very important. And you can see these are the numbers for our watershed. So look, this is the Snohomish watershed. So the top is Coho, not looking good. We're starting at what, 2001 goes to 2016. Nice downward trend. And then you look at Snoqualmie, which is, what is this one? Oops. The one on the end, the Chinook, down here, down, and then the Chum, the Chum is a total crash right there. And this isn't, I mean, unfortunately, this isn't just for this watershed. All watersheds are seeing a downward decline in salmon populations. And what's happening? Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But what I pulled out on the slide, and I believe they're in your notebook as well, is I'm pulling this out from the State of the Waters, the 2016 State of the Waters, which the Western Washington Treaty Tribes, of which Tulalip is a part of, put together in terms of what is causing, what are these barriers, what are we seeing in our watersheds? And we're seeing 1,000 paper cuts. We're seeing degradation being higher, more degradation than we have restoration. So we're not getting ahead. We're not having net gain. We're not even having no net loss, really. We're having a net loss. We're seeing forest cover. We're seeing streams lacking woody debris. Our agricultural lands, we're not finding some of the buffers. I can go on, and I encourage you to take a look at that report. I think it had some good information, and I mean, it's depressing, honestly. I'll be truthful. But, it's what we're facing, and when we talk about it, and one of the things that, I'm not from the Northwest. I grew up in the Midwest, Indiana, and I moved out here about 20 years ago to go to graduate school. And I thought, oh, salmon, salmon, salmon. Oh, all we hear about is salmon. I'm so sick of salmon. And now that I've worked here, I'm like, no, salmon makes perfect sense. I mean, what a unique organism. Because when we take care of the salmon, we're taking care of the fresh water, we're taking care of the estuaries, and we're also thinking about the ocean. We're thinking about all three. And we're thinking about the food webs that support them and all those different habitats. And then you have the cultural aspect to it, especially for the Northwest as a region, and then also for the tribes. And there actually is, and I would like to remind you, it's a treaty reserved resource. So when the tribes were told, you're going to live on this land, when they ceded all that other land that they had been using, they said, we want the salmon. We want to keep the salmon. And so this is really important. And not only for the tribes. I mean, think about the economy that the salmon brings in for the fishing, for the recreation, for the nutrition. So I think it's a beautiful endpoint, because when you put salmon out there as this is what you're going to protect that food web the salmon depend on, going all the way into the benthic invertebrates, and then you're going to affect it on top. Right? All the larger animals, us, bears, eagles, whatever. All the higher trophic animals are feeding on that. So this is a nice endpoint. It's something people get, people usually like. So I think it's effective. I find when I talk about outreach, or even when I talk to elected officials about why they should care about stormwater, right? I think those are harder. I feel like the electeds are harder than the some of the citizens to convince of some of this stuff. And so, the overall, I think in the executive summary, it says this is what they're finding: human activities. So human activity is really what's changing these things in the landscape. And that's good because we can deal with humans, right? That's a little bit easier to deal with. At least, we know how to talk to each other and work together. So when we talk about stormwater and salmon, I really see the nexus as water, being that clear water. Because I had a professor in graduate school that said, the reason the West Coast has the cleanest water in the whole nation is because we have salmon. Because salmon require pure, well-oxygenated water. And if we don't have it, they're not there. And they've lost the salmon on the Atlantic side, so it doesn't matter. So in some ways, we're in a big fight. Because when we lose the salmon, if we lose the salmon, this water quality, it won't mean as much. Right? We won't have the reason. Salmon is a really good reason to keep our water clear. And I'm probably, you guys are probably going to hear this story 5 million times today. But I mean, I guess when I talk about stormwater, I have to tell the whole story. So we're talking about development, we're talking about a hardened landscape, and we're talking about changing the way the water moves on that landscape. And as it moves, it's picking up pollution. It's not going in the ground like it used to. So we're seeing one of the deaths, by 1,000 cuts. We're seeing sediment, we're seeing erosion, stream banks degrading, all because you're getting too much stormwater or you're not managing it in a correct way. And then you get into the pollution, and roads are the big polluter. They've got the zinc and the copper. We got copper in the brakes. Copper's particularly bad for salmon because it messes with their nose, and they don't. So when the young salmon will get eaten by a predator, they put out this chemical in the water. And that tells the other salmon there's a predator, and they all sink to the bottom. And and you can look it up on YouTube, actually. I found a YouTube video that has it. They have 2 salmon in a tank, and they exude that kind of chemical excretion into it. And you could see the one that has copper in the water, they just keep swimming. But the one without copper in the water, and once it gets that chemical signal, it just sinks right down. So you're seeing increased predation that's linked to this copper that's ending up in our natural waterways. And then also, if you think about it, it's a real toxic when it comes off those roads, and especially around here, right, with all the traffic. Oh my gosh, 2 hours in traffic. You're getting this whole cocktail, and it's, in some cases, we've seen killing the salmon outright before they get to the stream. But we have power as stormwater managers, I think. I mean, anybody, not even a stormwater manager. If you're a guy on a backhoe, you got power, in my opinion. And I think actually the guys on the backhoes have more power in some level because they're the ones doing real changes on the landscape. So when we think about the way we think about stormwater has changed, we can improve the quality, the quantity of water, when and how it reaches the stream, the recharge, and the aquifer. And we can do this in ways that benefit salmon recovery. And I like to say the change has begun, because we are now starting to think more along of, because it used to be it's a waste, get rid of it. Let's put it all in this little stormwater prison pond here and then send it out. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to look at it. Let's just get rid of it. But now people are thinking, no, let's use it as a resource. It's really not that dirty. Some of it isn't dirty at all. Some of it can be cleaned and then reused. So the whole idea is thinking of it as different, not a waste, but a resource. And I think that change has started with some of these low impact development. You could see how long I've been here, because it started with low impact development and now it's changing into green infrastructure. But I find that low impact development has some concepts that I don't find in green infrastructure. So I tend to separate them, I guess, because you're talking about minimized clearing. So this picture here, this area is traditional. So they go in, take out all the trees, make it all nice and flat, and put a bunch of houses there. And this way, they're keeping that forest cover, and they're just carving out just the areas for the house. And that's a new concept. That's actually a tribal housing development, and this is non-tribal next to it. And the other concept is sharing. So let's see, I guess it's a little easier. So right here, so all these houses, this is a housing development that actually didn't get built at Tulalip. But the idea was, instead of each house getting its own driveway, they're sharing it. So you're seeing like it goes to 2 or 3 houses, and they're taking some of the stormwater, and the plan was to kind of infiltrate it into this open area so that you're not centralizing this stormwater, you're kind of putting it in more natural ways. I mean, if you think about a forest, when it rains in a forest, it's uneven, right? And so it collects, and it creates its own little detention ponds on some level, right? And that's the idea of like, think about it as a more natural, like create your own little catchment areas. And so this area is that where you can infiltrate, and then you want to slow it down. That's the other big key for low impact development. And no more stormwater prisons. Yeah, they're ugly. Let's see. All right, so let's have a little fun, right? You guys have been sitting. So let's just shout it out. What is this? What do you think this is? What kind of green infrastructure element it is? Right over here. I can't hear you. Bioretention, swales. Yep, you got it. This one's easy. Permeable pavement. Yep. How about this one? This one over here for you guys. What's that? Enhanced bioswale? No. It's a constructed wetland. That was a kind of a hard one. I have an even harder one later. So this one, I bet you guys got that one right. Bioretention. Okay, this is your trick one. What is this? This is a green infrastructure element. Native vegetation, but no. What? Clearing limit? No. Pre-existing? No. It's the rooftop. Of the shed. You could kind of see the edge right there. So you could kind of see its edge right here, and that's the top of that shed. It's a green roof. Yeah, that was pretty cool. That's in Kirkland. Some guy who wanted to do it. He just wanted to try, even put a little rock on it. So it looks like you can never guess that it's a green roof from the right angle. So your mission is, if we're talking about many cuts, we're talking about many cures. And so, I mean, sometimes we think it's just a little fix, but that little fix is a little fix. And it's going to take 5 more little fixes, 10 more little fixes. So a little fix is still helping. And I think you kind of have to think about that in terms of, I think it can get discouraging sometimes working in our field, and that, you know, if it's a death by 1,000 cuts, then it's going to be a mend by 1,000 Band-Aids or whatever you're going to use. And then think about the change in philosophy. I know, you know, now we've gotten so the manual treats kind of green infrastructure equally. But let's get to the point where we're starting to think about it as the first choice. Because I think when 10 years, I don't know, I want to say, I think NOAA came out with something when I was talking about low impact development and how important and how useful that was for salmon recovery because it was mimicking natural conditions. So, just think about that and then put that into your whatever work the way that you can, and even just talk to people. I mean, I think the power of just talking to people is important. And then also engaging a diverse team, because for me, the variety is the spice of life, because that's what I enjoy, because I get to sometimes talk to the backhoe drivers, those crazy backhoe drivers that never seem to stay within the clearing limits. It's something like they get it on that backhoe and it just goes crazy, because I can't tell you how many times I go on a site, I'm like, what happened? What happened? And they're like, well, this guy got on this backhoe and he was just going crazy. And I mean, I've heard that at least 4 or 5 times, I have to say. So I don't know what it is about those backhoes, but people get on it. But also, the elected officials, we're talking engineers, we're talking science, we're talking landscapers, and all of these people are important. In some ways, the landscapers and the guys working on the road and doing maintenance are more important, because they're the ones, they're either going to make a cut or they're going to make a cure. And having them understand that in those day-to-day decisions and the impact and giving them power, I think is important. And it's true, they do. They have a lot of power because they're the ones moving things in dirt and changing things on the landscape. And so when you think about salmon recovery and stormwater management, you think about low impact development, reducing those impervious surfaces and adding green infrastructure elements to it. When you put trees and plants and good healthy soil to treat stormwater, you're also providing habitat, you're providing water storage, and you're putting it into the ground. And those aquifers need the water, because in the summer, we need that groundwater to feed those streams so the salmon have something to swim in, because a dry stream is not salmon habitat for any living one. And then also, for pollution, removing those pollution sources, and that's just, one drip at a time. What are you doing with that water, with that oil leaking out of your car? Talking to people and getting people, the cigarette butts. That's mine. I see cigarette butts popping out of people's windows, and I'm like, how can I? Because I've been looking at some studies, and there's not a lot, but even the filters, even the unsmoked filters are toxic to fish. They figured if you have a cigarette butt with a little bit of tobacco in a liter of water, it killed half of the fathead minnows. I don't know what the time period is. It might have been 24 hours. It could have been an acute toxicity test. But they find if you put that little bit of tobacco, which is the end of a spent cigarette, they're finding that toxicity. And, there's not a lot of information out there. And people are like, oh, it's just this little, it's fine. It's, and then talking to them about, what it means. And so what we did, I wanted to do an activity, but we didn't think we had enough time. But we did bring our activity. So when we talk about salmon, you think, oh, salmon, they're everywhere. It's, there's lots of them. Well, it's really hard to stay alive as a salmon. And so we brought together Kelly Finley, who is our outreach and education coordinator at Tulalip, put together the salmon survival game for the kids. But I thought it was very useful for me as an adult, because you realize how easy it is to die as a salmon and how lucky you are to actually make it to spawning. So we're going to set that game up over here on the table. And if anybody wants to come check it out, I encourage you. And there's candy, because we use candy for the markers. So if that works, come on over and check it out. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free. I think I have plenty of time.